Hi, I'm Elissa Robinson with the Contra Costa Resource Conservation District. I administer the Contra Costa Watershed Forum. On May 12th, we held a meeting to discuss tribal engagement, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how to do it better. We had a panel discussion where our speakers shared their experiences from their different perspectives. So Kanyon is an Ohlone person who works as a tribal consultant. Alex works for an agency that connects tribes with other government entities, and Adam, a non-native working for the Amah Mutsun tribe. There were a few requests that we share the video from people that were not able to attend. And so this results in our first recording up on the website. So I hope you enjoy. If you're not familiar with the Contra Costa Watershed Forum, we are a group that gathers every other month, and we connect people that are interested in and passionate about their creeks. Everybody from the person that's interested in their backyard creek to government agencies, to elected officials. We kind of have everybody in the room. And we bring speakers to provide education and inspiration on creek happenings around Contra Costa and the Bay Area. And if you are interested in learning more, you can visit our website, cocowaterweb.org, and sign up for our email list, and you can find out what our next meeting is and how to be involved. The next meeting is actually on July 14th. So hopefully we'll see you there. So I'm going to call out my presenters, Kanyon, Alex, Adam. Now that you've learned quite a bit about what we're working on and who we are at the Watershed Forum, I'm looking forward to having a discussion with you. But the first questions I wanted to ask was for each of you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you. And you can, chime in however you want. I'm not going to call each of you out.
I don't mind getting us started. So just to make sure can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's like my biggest fear is I will talk and then no one can hear me. So happy to hear that. So for starters, my name is Alexander Talazan, and I work with the California Indian Environmental Alliance. And I just want to state that I myself am not California Native American. I'm actually Native American up north. I'm from Choctaw Blackfoot. So different nuances of just being able to say, you know, where I am, who I'm located, as well as what part of the region of California I'm from. So I just wanted to clarify that I am not California Native. And I also want to start off by saying that part of the work that the California Indian Environmental Alliance does, and I'm just going to share my screen briefly. We do work with many different outlets. We try to do work mainly with Mercury, helping tribes be more aware, as well as the general public, about what type of fish you can eat while you're pregnant, how much fish you can eat depending on the area, what type of fish. And we do this because a lot of the actual tribes we've worked with throughout the California use fish as a large substance of their diet. So we just want to try to increase the awareness of these types of things. We also do tribal self-advocacy. In this case, I work with the California Indian Environmental Alliance as the San Francisco Bay Area Tribal Coordinator. And that allows me to work with the 9 counties, including Contra Costa, and helping tribes get prepared for Prop 1 Round 2 implementation phase, which is coming in the year of 2022 in March or September. So we're getting ready to do implementation projects with the $22 to $24 million we have this year. We also work with a lot of youth environmental leadership programs, you know, from high school to colleges, as well as outreach days for California Indian Day and Earth Day. Unfortunately, this year we haven't been able to do as much of that just because of COVID, but we do a lot of work with that. We've also done a lot of work with the global Mercury content regarding early 2000s. When the organization was first started, it was mainly to do work on mercury, because that is such a huge problem we see, not just in California, but throughout the tribes of the entire United States, as well as a global entity within New Zealand and Canada. So we got a large conference back, I think it was in early 2006 with NATO. They got together, they all were able to attend a conference and share resources and to start these global conversations. And so today, one of the things we do now is, as I was saying, is the tribal self-advocacy. So CIEA works out at the beginning of early 2019. CIEA had worked, one second, sorry. CIEA worked with not only the San Francisco Bay Area's 9 counties, they work with the tribes of the North Coast, which there's 34 tribes in the North Coast. And the North Coast represents Sonoma, Santa Rosa, up all the way to the, I want to say past Eureka, but I feel like that's too far. But with those 34 tribes, they have been working with them for the past 10 years. They do really well in establishing cohabitat with the local governments and local agencies. In fact, they've been on the coordinating committee of the IRWM process for North Coast, also known as the NCRP, since the beginning. And so at this point, they've had established a really strong relationship. So whenever the tribes are not present, the decision body doesn't make any votes or make any references or suggestions without the tribe's presence, because they have such a very strong connection, as well as they try to make sure that they maintain cultural awareness. And if there's a project that's going to happen, they make sure that they do have a letter of support from that tribe or work in collaboration. And as well as that, CIEA has worked with the Mountain County regions through the IRWM process as well, the Sacramento River funding area. And just recently, we've been collaborating and providing support for some of the lower counties. Some of the lower Southern California tribes in their IRWM. And I just want to also add that some of the work that we've been doing at this point is really new to the Bay Area. When we first came on, and I'm probably gonna get a little ahead of myself, but when we first came on, a lot of the presence of tribes were still and always relevant. Unfortunately, they weren't identified by the coordinating committee and the governance structure of the Bay Area. So a lot of the work that I did in the beginning of my work in the early 2018 was really just kind of preparing and finding these tribes and getting them together and connect, because due to a lot of the lateral oppression and the diaspora, unfortunately, a lot of the tribal members and tribes have been pitted against one another. And so there was never really a large gathering or a convening of tribes together. So through the work that I've been doing with CIEA and for the IRWM process, we were actually able to develop a tribal advisory committee, a body which had has had at the most 5 tribal partners and tribal organizations gathered in the same room. And this usually involves chairmen or chairwomen or chairpersons to get together with their point person, and I have 2 of them here with me today, which is Kanyon and Adam French, and I will kind of introduce them in a little bit. But I just want to say that through the work that we've all been doing together, we've been establishing a lot of stronger connections and building relationships, not only within our internal processes, but we've also been making more awareness and building the capacity to have the tribes be at the tables with the agencies, as you're seeing now. And I really have been just grateful to hear all of the work you are all doing, but it just delights me to hear that you guys want to have more tribal input and to really bring the awareness of the cultural aspects from not just the creeks, but also the heritage that surrounds that land. So thank you. And I'd like to just pass it, like I was saying, to the point persons, and I'll let them kind of explain themselves. But I must say that we're very happy to be here.
As we wait for them to chime in, since they were very happy to have you here. This is a conversation that I've wanted to have with the forum for a while now. And I think what connects me to each of you is our IRWM work and working on the DAC TIP program that we have here in the San Francisco Bay region. So, Adam, Kanyon, you're up.
I'll chime in. Musi Tuhi's Contra Costa Kanyon CoyoteWoman, Sarah's Roots. Oh, my voice is off today. I'm sorry. I am present here as a representative of the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone Peoples. I work with Tribal Chairman Jonathan Cordero and Greg Castro, who are Ramaytush. I myself am Mutsun. I come from the Indian Kanyon Mutsun Band of Costanoan Ohlone people. I am daughter of Tribal Chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers. So I'm a Southern native, a Southern Ohlone person in the Northern Bay Area territory. And as a new invested community member in these projects, my cultural background and my historical background has me following my mother's legacy of honoring truth and history and protecting sacred sites and ancestral remains and cultural resources. So all my life, I've been in an environment where I recognize how environmental racism is so prevalent and how our Americentric perspective has been quite limited due to our education systems. Yet I'm a huge proponent of honoring truth and history. And so I am a huge advocate of wanting to connect community and bring people together and just honor the layers of history. Because I as much as I would want to prioritize pre-contact history, the biggest gap that we have in our community is what brought us here. So with that being said, it's just it's like we have pre-contact history, Ohlone territory, and we don't always talk about how Ohlone is a misnomer. And then all of a sudden kids come to me saying, why don't we see natives, or you're not native because you don't exist? Because I've been told that by little ones. And all Indians are dead. And so it's like that history right in between, right when as contact occurred, and then all the way to today, all the laws, all of these layers. Because if we think about it, all of us, when we honor our ancestors and their ancestors, we all have indigenous lineages from the land of our ancestors. And one step we could take is honoring indigenous protocol and acknowledging the land that we're on now, and attempting to include and collaborate the indigenous peoples of these territories, because they are the community that are the first stewards of these territories. So as a representative of Indian Canyon Nation, as a voice and invested community member representing the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone Peoples, I'm new to the conversations of Prop 1 funding and California water projects and integrated water resource management programs. Yet this is a very familiar conversation, and actually I'm recognizing some names because I am a cultural monitor when it comes to archaeologically sensitive sites, NAGPRA, CIEA, Section 106, AB 52, consultation, all that fun stuff. So I'm happy to be here, and I will give Adam a chance to say hello.
Thank you, Kanyon. Nice to see you. Nice to see all of you this morning and hear a bit about the work that you're all doing up in Contra Costa County. My name is Adam French. I'm here on behalf of the Amah Mutsun Land Trust, a group that works, an NGO that works on behalf of the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band. And the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band are the present-day descendants of the Mutsun-speaking peoples who were taken to the San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz missions. So this is the territory of the Amah Mutsun, extends from southernmost Santa Clara County down into San Benito County, Santa Cruz County, and parts of Monterey County. So it cuts across those. I think the map that Kanyon shared earlier gives a general sense, as the disclaimer when you access that site says, you know, those are not precise delineations of tribal territory, but to give you a general idea. So if anyone would like more specific information, it's always good to reach out to the specific tribes, to the chair people of those tribes to get that information. Anyway, I am not a native person myself. I'm a friend and ally of the Amah Mutsun for going on a decade. And I have a background in supporting groups that are often excluded from resource management processes. I've worked for years with Peruvian campesino communities as part of my doctoral training and ongoing research interests. And living in Santa Cruz, I was able to engage in the same or similar kind of work supporting the Amah Mutsun's engagement in this integrated regional water management process, largely through the welcome or invitation of Alex and Sia, who were organizing the tribal participation in that process in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I do recognize some of you from that IRWM work or IRWM work. And yeah, I feel privileged to be able to support the tribal community in this way and build relationships. And hopefully we'll get some time to talk about how we can proactively and productively build those sorts of relationships to support tribal engagement in these various stewardship and land management, water management processes. So I'll stop there. I think we'll have time to talk more about details. Thank you. Oh, wait, one last thing. I have a very unstable internet connection. I've already dropped off once. So if you can't hear me, just let me know and I'll turn off my camera. And if I drop off, I'll join again as quickly as I can. Sorry about that, but it's just the nature of my connection. Okay, thank you.
All right, it's okay. I think from your question, I'm gonna follow that. When is the best time to open up lines of communication? When's the best time to collaborate? Yes, Kanyon, go right ahead. Just chime in.
At the beginning. Well, ideally, because from my experience as an Indigenous cultural representative, we get letters where it's right at the EIR, the Environmental Impact Report, and the project finally recognized that it might have biological, historical, and cultural impact. And then they go, oh, I didn't know I had to know about that. And I didn't know that I even had to consider that. Therefore, okay, we have to reach out to the Native American Heritage Commission. They gave us a list of Indigenous peoples and groups that want to be consulted or given information about any project that impacts that territory. And then they offer this obligatory mandatory letter saying, okay, per AB 52 and consultation and CIEA section 106, we have to reach out to you because the area is a declaration of negative impact, which is not always the case. There are many cultural resources and many significantly archaeologically sensitive areas that have not been documented yet because negative declaration, because an area has been disturbed in the 30s, 50s, 70s. Then they try and say, do you have any information that we could help us with this project? And it's a way of saying, like, we really don't want to deal with this, but we obligatorily have to. And it's kind of painful as a Native person. I am happy California has these regulations to encourage and involve us, but I do feel some sort of way about it if my partial sarcasm is not coming off too strong. And so I say early in the process as possible, because Indigenous communities have insight that could help these projects by saying some of these areas may have significant cultural resources present or cultural regard and respect, because it's not just ancestral remains beneath the soil. These are cultural landscapes, ecological environments, and insight that our community has considered. So earlier on to consult with our communities, and there are quite a few in the Bay Area. Some we do have the large group of communities gathering with the IRWM. At the same time, there are many people who can trace their ancestry to the Bay Area who are not affiliated with tribes, who also deserve the opportunity to potentially be in at least in consultation or at least of a council or conversation to voice considering how their ancestral homelands are impacted. And so beyond these government proceedings and procedures, I highly recommend community take steps to honor truth and history and learn about the Native peoples and the history, because the way I put it is, if you do not know the history of the land that you're on, and you're going to make a decision for the future, for the environment, for the community, if you do not know the history, 50, 150, 250, 530 years, you're coming to the table underprepared. And most of us, we want to be as prepared as possible to help make these decisions going forward. So that as early as possible is ideal. At the same time, I do recognize the struggle. Our Indigenous communities are quite busy. And some people are like, I've tried to reach out to the Muwekma band. I've tried to reach out to the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone Peoples. The chairman and Indigenous culture representative is not available, and I get it. At the same time, you shouldn't let that door close. It needs to stay open to the best of your ability, please.
So what I'm hearing is instead of just a notice or notification, that there should be a relationship, a kind of continual conversation of like, hey, we're thinking about doing a project, and it might be 10 years down the line, but you should at least, like, as we're starting the planning process, definitely start the communication about it.
Yes.
Okay. Alex, Adam, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in, and then I'm going to throw Adam under the bus after and make him talk about something. So, well, encourage him. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I want to just kind of say that. So one of the things that CIEA does that's really unique is in our aspect is that we act as the hub for agencies for work for large communities, for assemblymen to be able to reach out to those tribal members, those groups that we are aware of as best as we can. And I'm not trying to say that CIEA has this much better map than the one that we just showed with native land, but we work in building relationships. So every week we constantly are updating our tribal context, and the reason why we do it every week is because they're constantly changing. One of the things that's just constantly adapting is that we see a lot, for example, in the North Coast and with mountain counties and Sacramento River funding area, is that tribal members who stay within the tribes and they work with the tribes, they end up wearing 5 or 6 hats. So they're doing all these different things. So sometimes they get transferred, they move around, or they unfortunately no longer stay with the tribe. So that's why we update it so constantly. So yes, I completely agree with Kanyon. It's ideally to be brought on at the beginning, once you have the understanding that you're going to be working on something. But it is hard to be able to identify a tribe if you're not familiar with it. So that's, again, why I'm happy to be here and just say that we want to make sure that the ability would be to, sorry, my partner just ran by. The ability to be able to share this information by communicating with our agency. We're happy to help out in any way we possibly can. And if I or myself don't know who you can contact with, we reach out to the tribes. We try to make sure that the tribes are included in this work to really kind of show transparency. And that's one of the biggest things that I believe Kanyon has expressed. And you can kind of see in the adamancy of how she was saying it, is just the transparency. Because countless times we've seen, and it's difficult to be able to be brought on and just mainly looked at as a checkbox. So when you have this idea of revitalizing the culture, bringing back the acknowledgements, these things build more of a relationship. They build more of a connection. And it doesn't have to be something that has to be a large project. It doesn't have to be something that can be, tens of thousands of millions of dollars worth of something for the tribes. But it's because a lot of them really do the work themselves for free. A lot of them actually, and I'm just going to speak on some of the chair people I work with in the Bay Area. They've been doing this work for 20, 30 years, never gotten paid for it. This is just stuff that they feel the need to do because it's their history. And so, there's all these different opportunities to share, not only in just being able to collaborate and share history and knowledge, but this is why I was saying I wanted to encourage Adam to speak next, because I wanted him to share about the Steward program. Because certain tribes, and not all, but some of them have been developing and creating these steward programs, which they allow the ability to work not only with, as an agency's consultation, to do acknowledgements, to do signs, but also to work hands on the ground. So I'll just pass it over to Adam, please.
Thanks, Alex. Just a few background comments before I say a little bit about the stewardship work that AMLT does, or the Amah Mutsun Land Trust. I thought Elissa's point, or the way she sort of summarized what Kanyon had said, was really important. You know, that if possible, it'd be great to be reaching out and getting to know the tribal community well before you're planning a specific project with them. And in that way, you build a relationship, you start to cultivate trust, and you get to understand the tribe's history, their goals, their values, and how you can support them. So, you know, by having that relationship already in place, you'll have a much stronger place to then involve the tribal community in projects. So I'd say, you know, to the degree possible, if you work at an agency or an NGO, if you can, you know, have a staff member who goes out and does that proactively, or at least tries to. And these points about tribal chairs and the tribal community being difficult to reach at times is true. A lot of people have been displaced from their traditional territory. The Amah Mutsun have almost exclusively been pushed out of their traditional homeland. So it's a bit of a process sometimes to reach people. You need to be persistent and understand the limitations on people's time.
Hi.
As Alex said, it's absolutely right that a lot of the work that's being done by tribal chair people is on a volunteer basis. And imagine the constraints you might face if you were doing a lot of your professional work on a volunteer basis. So just bear all that in mind. With all of that said, the work that the Amah Mutsun Land Trust has done and the approach that they've taken has really been to create an institution in the land trust that can engage productively with agencies sort of on the agency's ground, right? Or within that professional arena. And part of that, the flagship program of the Land Trust, is this Native Stewardship Corps, which employs Native people, many of them younger people who need gainful employment and want to reconnect with their ancestral territory. The Land Trust has built relationships with a lot of the land owners or resource managers within the tribe's ancestral territory to do work on the ground and to employ these Native stewards in those projects. So it's a nice model and a very effective model for providing good work and providing access to territory that otherwise is owned by other people at this point. So there's kind of a restorative justice element in this process. But it's not an institution that a lot of tribes have at this point. So, you know, you have to find ways to open up those kinds of opportunities to the tribal communities that don't have a land trust or some other formal institution. This is especially important for the non-federally recognized tribes that are many of the California tribes with whom you might work, especially here in the Bay Area. So, you know, and maybe you can help them establish this kind of institutional link as well. So these are the kinds of things I would encourage everyone to think about. And I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
So it all comes back to building this relationship. And the next step in this relationship, kind of the question or idea that I want to go to, is funding. Because I mean, if you're not a checkbox, if this is a relationship that we're building, we need to make sure that it is not something that happens to the detriment of each band or tribe, so that they aren't just a passion project where they're contributing and not being compensated for their time. So are there any recommendations that you have? Is it looking for grants that support the tribe and projects? Is it having a staff person that works with tribes instead of having the tribes, you know, spend all their resources working with agencies? Any suggestions on that? Because really, it's everybody should be compensated for their time and their expertise, right?
Yes.
I got a yes
Well,
from Lucille.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I could offer insight. All of the above. I believe it's a multifaceted approach. The same way when we are combating climate change and approaches to ecological restoration, we're not all going to be just weeding invasive plants, or we're all not going to be building healthy soil. It's a multifaceted approach. I started Kanyon Consulting as a business arm to continue a lot of the cultural work I'm doing, because some agencies will not consult with a single Indigenous individual. They need to partner with some, business entity, an LLC or a consultation branch. And a lot of the projects that I've worked on around archaeologically sensitive sites, I've been a subcontracted through archaeological firms. So I'm, as a tribal member, I'm not even part of the bidding process around some of these things. And so limited capacity. And so all of the above. There have been advocates who have pursued grants intentionally to bring in Indigenous consultants. I do appreciate there being a community member, either as a liaison or hiring Indigenous peoples. When we talk about, I call it the Jedi movement: justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm watching Silicon Valley look at it like a check item list yet again. There are integral people who are doing the good work, and I'm seeing amazing work happen there. I'm still going to be critical of the whole check item list when they really think that they can get a stamp of approval or a sticker or some, accolade that says, I took the class. It's like, that's not what it means. And so I offer workshops. Kanyon Consulting offers workshops around some of these conversations with an Indigenous insight lens, because I'm a Southern Ohlone, and I work often in the North Bay. And so I ensure that whenever I have consultation projects that impact these territories, that the Native people of the territory always have an opportunity to be part of the project. If a land acknowledgement is developed without them, either because availability or limitations, in my contracts, I am ensuring that if the Indigenous peoples of the territories do have a conflict or qualm with what was produced, their voice and perspective is to be prioritized. And that it seems awkward when it comes to how we're used to doing business as usual, like, the ink is dry, we're done, right? And I'm sitting here like, nope, if they have a problem, that you need to accommodate. And so it's turning what we've been conditioned with on its head. So I'm saying multifaceted, and so that's like pursuing grants, yes, opportunity or a commitment to consultation, yes, ensuring that protocols and procedures are part of that consideration. MOU, MOA, and I've been kind of like mentioning an MOR, Memorandum of Recognition. Even though we are not federally recognized, your community, your agency, your circle of people says we recognize that we are on the territory of this community, ancestors and community members, past, present, and future generations. And the active community groups, we can list them. And we set a commitment to recognizing the rights of nature or taking on these extra steps that the Indigenous community of the territory want to prioritize. If Native people of the territory are really concerned about their water, then let's talk about what ways we can set standards and protocols and procedures to shift water. So funding is a brat, but any way you could advocate, let's make it happen.
I like the MOR idea. That's a really good one. Alex, Adam, and it's interesting because you're all looking at this from different perspectives. You have Kanyon with the consulting, you have Adam with the actual tribe, and then Alex with CIEA. And so I know it must work differently for each of you that are participating in this.
Yes, and I just want to kind of provide my input. So it would be ideal to have the to have the funding to be able to hire someone just to work with the tribes. I understand that doesn't happen. One thing that I've kind of that CIEA, and one of the things that when we convene the Tribal Advisory Committee for the Bay Area, which Adam and Kanyon are both part of, we developed a set of kind of there's a roughly 25 things different types of guidelines and outcomes that we suggested to agencies and stakeholders to be able to increase engagement with tribes. And so one of them that we did come up with was, definitely, if you can't hire someone to do the work, if you're going to ask an agency or a tribal member to represent a tribe, or with the approval of the tribe, of course, or you're going to ask the chairman, or you're going to ask, for example, Adam or Kanyon's time, to be able to offer an honorarium, to be able to offer some form of a stipend, because for one, as Kanyon has mentioned, she's not as familiar with some of the related work, and that goes to any meeting. There's research that goes into it. There's time you're taking out of your day to do it. And, I'm lucky enough as well. I don't work for necessarily a large agency, but I do get the opportunity to work and help collaborate. But that's out of the time I'm taking from CIEA. I don't believe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam or Kanyon, that you all have that same type of opportunity to do those kinds of work. You have to take it out of your own time just to help work. And I could see her. It's perfect. Thank you. But so these are just things to consider. And I'm not suggesting large amounts, but ideally anything helps. And it's the building that opportunity to say, hey, we understand this is a form of compensation. And when you hold the stakeholder engagement meetings, when you ask people to, provide input, provide feedback, once in a while, not a big deal. If it comes to be, a 2,000-page document, that's a different story. Because that was one thing that I got to work with Adam and Kanyon on earlier this year to help with the integrated regional water management. I'm sorry, not earlier this year, earlier a few years ago. The Bay Area Integrated Regional Water Management Plan stated that there are no tribes of the Bay Area. There were none. And they did an entire encompassing research, and they hired a contractor to come do this work before I was brought on with CIEA. And that's what they declared. So obviously that was incorrect. When CIEA was brought on, that was a huge problem we had. So I got the lucky job of reading this giant 2,000-page document. I was compensated for that. But this is, again, the opportunity, Adam and Kanyon, one of the things that we had to do based off this was to talk about it with the tribes, to provide their input. And through this work with the IRWM, we were able to provide funding for them. But I don't believe we wouldn't have got as much feedback and as much effort into it, because that was very extensive to be able to go through that. And it wasn't even just adding the one section for the tribes or adding input. No, we went through the entire thing, providing feedback on traditional ecological knowledge, on past work we've done with, past work tribes have done with agencies and or groups. We try to make it really encompassing as possible. And I will pass it on to Adam if you have anything to add into.
I would perhaps just add that, agencies, especially when it comes to things like these implementation grants offered by DWR or similar, especially state level grants, may have an ability to serve as a lead and support a tribal organization or the tribal community and participation. It's a lot to ask. I mean, I think through the Disadvantaged Communities and Tribal Involvement Program, we're really seeing the challenges for smaller organizations, community level organizations, tribal organizations to take the lead in these big state-run grant programs. So some groups can do that more effectively than others, but agencies will often have dedicated staff for the administrative portions of those projects, and just more expertise perhaps, or training in the grant writing and grant proposal, all the phases of the proposal process. So think again proactively, I would say, about how you can involve the tribal community and really support tribal organizations in that process. And I'll stop there.
I do want to add there are a few groups like there's the Segurite Land Trust, the Shumi Land Tax, voluntary land tax offer. They also provide educational materials. I am a bad capitalist. I offer educational materials on my website. And so collaborations and some of the best relationships and community building opportunities don't always look like what we are familiar with as business as usual. Like I'll explain, in Indian Canyon, my mother didn't say, I want to have a museum. Let's find someone to help build a museum or a cultural center. The relationship happened and evolved where a student and intern came to Indian Canyon, said she was focusing on museum curation and ethno botanical knowledge. I forgot what the class was, but botany. And she said, I think it's possible that I could, would you want or would you need a ethnobotanical display, a small little museum? And my mother's like, you know what, if you're interested in that, we can share and connect. And now our community has a small museum botanical display. And it's it's what came of the relationship. And the same thing with the watershed project that I consulted with. I was really happy that an elder was interviewed because to me, our elders are walking libraries. And and in this time, in this pandemic, health and just the fear of losing these amazing libraries is scary. And so being able to record and connect community, amazing. So like projects and communities can come together in a good way. And we don't always know what that may look like, but good things can happen. So, yeah, however you can, let's make it happen.
So you're leading the way into this next question of projects done right. Can you identify any that you've worked with at all that you say this was done well, this engagement was how I would recommend, it's like the standard that everybody should follow, or at least take pieces of it? Would you tell me about them? Which projects, if you
Let me give you the worst example, just to start that off.
Going opposite, okay.
And then that way I can let Adam and Kanyon really provide the most input on how they could have done better or potentially what could do that. So in the North Coast, for example, an agency hired a contractor without going to the coordinating committee, without talking with a tribe that had any input there, and or even provide or asking them for their what they could provide, asking them if they wanted to work together, provide input, or even how it should be done. They started building and digging and doing the work for about 3 months. And then they came to the coordinating committee. And then they came to the tribe. At that point, the tribe said and sent them a cease and desist. So I'm just going to leave that one there. Obviously, that no longer is happening. And it costs a lot of money. But I will just pass that on to Adam or Kanyon.
I'll maybe offer one example that is relevant to some of us here and that we've talked about. I think that the San Francisco Bay Area's IRWM Disadvantaged Communities and Tribal Involvement, or DACTI program, is actually a pretty good example of an approach done well. So first, the state made funding available through this Disadvantaged Communities program. So there was dedicated funding. And then they, in the San Francisco Bay Area, they were able to hire CIEA, which is a tribally led nonprofit. So that immediately sort of brings some legitimacy, I think, and trust that wouldn't be there. And Kanyon can speak to this better than myself as a non-native person can. But there's a group that's already tribal and that has background in reaching the tribal community and establishing relationship. And yeah, CIEA has been able to bring together a group of the tribes from the Bay Area. Not all members chose to participate for some interesting reasons, which maybe Alex would like to elaborate on. or not. But yeah, it's been done pretty well. There's been a lot of time to engage, both in person and, due to the pandemic, now more remote meetings. But fortunately, we were able to engage quite a lot in person beforehand and just take the time, have the resources necessary to build relationships, understand each other's goals, all the things that we've sort of been talking about. And I'll stop there to give other people a chance to chime in.
I'm going to come from multiple angles on this one because I'm feeling really blessed that I've had many opportunities of collaborations that have gone well. One being Ream Creek Watershed, where I'll be blunt. We've built and connected in community, and I really appreciate all the community members who I was involved with. But when I was only looking at it on paper as an email, it looked like a quick, hey, can we have a quick consultation of a land acknowledgement? And we really want to acknowledge Native peoples, and we only have one page to fill, and it's a quick turnaround. And so on the surface, I'm like, here we go. I'm going to have to shove my foot in the door and get it slammed on, and then try and leverage what I can. And what the beautiful evolution of it was the recognition of, yes, this was already in the making, and realizing Indigenous peoples should have a voice, how they're being depicted and represented. And then, of course, I, as an Indigenous person, but not of the East Bay, I'm voicing just in case, because if the Native peoples of the territory aren't communicated with, I don't speak for them. However, if no one's in the room, at least someone is trying to advocate. And so from that, it evolved to making sure there's a website, land acknowledgement, because having written paper land acknowledgements or some placard or signage for the community to witness is really wonderful and amazing. I also am I'm a native, digital native, so having land acknowledgements on websites, because then you have clickable links and mouse over opportunities, so you could link and offer connection to the maps, or offer connection to native-land.ca, or active communities, or other examples of land acknowledgements, or interviews. And what came of it was interviews, and I really appreciate it. Another success case was a parallel to some of my work in the South Bay. There was an organization called Ecosystem Restoration Camps, and they're an international company, organization, and they're just networks. It's a hub. And so I became a part of, well, I was only invited the day before the event, because someone wanted to have a land acknowledgement and have a Native person offer a land acknowledgement. Yet again, the last minute consideration. I am happy to be invited and happy to be involved, but it kind of stings. And I rearranged my schedule, made my way there, and listened, and I was really liking some of the conversations, but part of it was well-intended permaculture design certificate holders wanting to apply their knowledge in the territories that they call home. And it feels good, because it's like, we want to talk about food sovereignty, we want to talk about carbon sequestration, we want to talk about water retention, we want to talk about all of these things. And not many of them knew anything about California natives, nor the history, nor the ecological impact of colonization. And I'm sitting here like, if I'm going to have any part of this, I'm going to talk about cultural competency. I want to have cultural competency courses, at a minimum cultural sensitivity, because I do that whenever I'm on any job sites around archaeologically sensitive areas. But cultural competency, and what has evolved from that is a cultural competency circle, and now we have a course. So I want, and Indigenous peoples from their territories all do this. It does not look like what already exists. All of our communities are doing this. Any Indigenous person who has consulted with non-Indigenous peoples and settlers on their lands is engaging in conversations around cultural competency. I happen to be finding a way to put it in a nice little package and a nice little workshop so it could be presented in this business world. But fundamentally, all of our communities have done this, are doing this, and continue to do this. And so, and it involves all of our communities. And so I just happened to have found a way to say, like, this is like a workshop, or this is like a small gathering that all it is honoring truth and history. And it's showing perspective, it's shining light on what many of us have not been given a chance to learn about, to witness, or to empathize with. And when we take those steps, sometimes we bring in these considerations into our decisions, and to our projects that are quite helpful, because then we're all kind of aligned. Like this picture right here, we call it miner's lettuce. I don't like using that word because it's mountain lettuce, it's indigenous lettuce, it's Indian lettuce, it's Claytana blah, 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 another Britannica term. It is nutritious, it is edible, and it is part of our ecosystem. And by saying miner's lettuce, you are contributing to the colonial narrative. By saying we're acknowledging the miners who actually suffered from scurvy, and the indigenous peoples offered insight of how they could survive. And so the layers of history we can honor. So yeah, I feel as though I've been really lucky to be invited into these spaces. And fundamentally, it's been allies and accomplices who have empowered me to strengthen how I present myself to the world and strengthen my vernacular in being able to convey these truths to the best of my ability. It's the wisdom and knowledge of my mentors and my elders and my ancestors as well. But it also has been amazing allies and accomplices who have opened space in the positions that they are in. And that any one of you can do that for Indigenous peoples. And just because we may not be able to keep up with your vernacular does not mean gives anybody the right to speak, in a patronizing fashion, because we may not speak this way because we have knowledge in other areas that we would not do that to you. Just because we can't keep up with the acronyms, we would not dismiss you for not knowing our traditional ecological knowledge and these layered histories of nuance that we know. We wouldn't do it to you. Please don't do it to us. And an open space. So that opportunity, because I'm the only me, but I do know my relatives all have the potential to navigate the world like I do. And it does take us being in community to strengthen those abilities and have access to get there. So that's my kind of insight.
All right, that was really good. And it's nice that you create these opportunities to educate and to that cultural compensation. That's not the right word. But sorry, there's a big saw that just started downstairs and it totally took my mind off of what I was saying. Yes, okay, sorry. We're gonna go to questions now because I know that we have a lot of questions and that means that I can not try to use words and there's lots of noise. So, Anne, you had one that you put in the chat.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to just read it out loud for folks. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here and they have a lot going on. They have their own projects and priorities, which may not always align with other agency and organization projects and priorities. So I'm just wondering if you have advice or insight on kind of how we balance this vital need that you all have early and often, with also being mindful and respectful of tribal capacity.
In my perspective, and this is, feel free to chime in, change it, Adam or Kanyon. I believe the best way to go about it is to start those connections early. And when I say that, I don't mean like reaching out to them a month before the project. And when I say that, I mean, you could start tomorrow. And by reaching out, it could just be sending an email. It could be getting on a call, looking up their website, subscribing to their email listserv, sharing your listserv, just starting that kind of connection and building someone to talk to. That's how I perceive it. And then eventually, because you have that ability to kind of communicate through that person you spoke to at the beginning, whether it's 6 months ago, you still have somewhat of a connection. Then once there is the project, you can reach out to them, because if you're coming to them, and I've heard a few chair people express this, and just to kind of collaborate, the chairperson's kind of like the president in a sense, or vice president, or however you want to see it, the executive director. They may get 30, 40 papers, 50 plus in a week or a day sometimes, and I don't know what you would call them, but just to kind of look over this summary of EIR or provide input, so just sometimes having that connection beforehand saves a lot of time. Please feel free to chime in, everyone.
Another layer, there are times that some people say, how can we help you, or how can we get involved with what you're doing? Yet some people will just say, you do that work. Like, I'll explain, like, if someone tries to volunteer for my mother or our tribe, and then we say, well, we do need help with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they go, oh, I don't know, or oh, I didn't mean that. Or some people like to say, like, what does the tribe need? And we answer, land back. And then they go, oh, wait, not that much, not that much. Somehow, like, in that relationship building, navigating how what's within the realm of possibility, like, I have these skills, or I have these abilities, or this is what I can do in the position I'm in, because that is always helpful, because, like, when we skill share, we and engage in culture sharing. I really appreciate, I call some of the community members, possibly even here, or some of the community members, tribal liaisons, or other spaces, they have the decoder ring, the transcribing, or the translating decoder ring, where they take my cultural indigenous concerns and translate it into government speak. And they say, oh, so you want considerations to the protocols around data recovery. Okay. You want non-destructive analysis around ancestral remains. Okay. And we shall put it in here that this is a recommendation. I'm like, all right, here we go. Yes. That is an amazing skill to have. So some of y'all are really awesome in hearing one layer and then being able to convey it. And so you guys got the decoder rings, is what I call it. And so I do understand the struggle when we want to reach out and then we may not get a response. And sometimes we have that energy of that entitlement, like, I feel like they should respond back. We still can take steps to honor truth and history. So becoming familiar with their websites, our community's websites. And there's also reading that we could do. A lot of reading. Benjamin Madley, An American Genocide, Elias Castillo, A Cross of Thorns, Monica L, Resurrecting a California Mission Myth, or, oh my gosh, my dyslexia gets in my way a lot. I apologies. I have these book recommendations on my website, KanyonConsulting.com. And so, like, but subscribing to social media posts, I know the Amah Mutsun Land Trust has Protect Jotastock, and there are action items. I know the Shumi Land Tax of Sigorte Land Trust has recommendations of what community can do. So some of our communities are taking steps to saying, okay, if you can't get a hold of us and you want to learn about what we are doing, or things of our community, here are some steps. And so that's always helpful, because when people show up saying, oh my gosh, I really want to learn more about the Ohlone tribe. And I'm like, I know you don't know, but there's no such thing as an Ohlone tribe, because Ohlone is like saying Bay Area in, or Silicon Valley in. Yeah, we're in Ohlone territory, and I am an Ohlone person. I proudly will say I'm Ohlone, but I also educate and recognize that Ohlone is a misnomer, and it was documented in the 1800s, late 1800s, because of colonization. And the original is Oholon, single village site in San Gregorio. A lot of history there, but layers of history. And it's beautiful when people go, I didn't know what I didn't know. So we all can take steps to honor truth and history.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you guys are all doing the heavy lifting of creating that recognition. And that does take a lot of work as a person of color, having to address the situation and be like, well, this is what's wrong, and let me help you try to fix it, even though, like, the compensation might not be there. You still are giving your expertise and your opinion to benefit the world. So Ave had a question in the chat. How do we find the appropriate people? We use the NAHC list, but it's not always easy to contact people. I know that, Alex, you kind of extended the offer of, if you can't find somebody, I can try to help.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to in any way. And my email, I can drop it again in the chat, but and I'm more than happy to help out with that. The biggest thing that CIEA does is we act as a middle ground. Because it really does come down to is a lot of the opportunities, and like you're saying, is that tribes and the chairmen, they get busy. They don't have the opportunity. I get to contact them all the time and tell them, hey, I have this great opportunity at any time of day. Me and Kanyon have had some great conversations way past business hours. And Adam as well. So the thing is that, what the CIEA doesn't act just as an agency. Really what I did at the beginning that Adam mentioned is I built relationships with each of the tribes. And so that way that when I'm asking them or working with them, it's not just me giving them a survey, hey, fill this out, please. It's one of the 1,000 surveys you've done already. No, I explain more in depth. What's the point of the survey? Why we're doing it, what is going to happen after, and then I'll go over the results. We make sure that it's collaboration with that. So yeah, any way I can help out with, if there's something that there's a collaboration or there's a way of connection, or if you want to provide input from stakeholders, I'm happy to help out with those as best I can.
Wonderful. I know we're at our time, but I really don't want to end the conversation quite yet. If you guys want to hang out around a little bit longer, there might be a couple more questions that we can answer. I know you're all busy people. And I do want to add one more thing on the relationship building aspect. I've been attending the Together Bay Area Spring Summit, and the first day, which was Monday, we had Chairman Lopez from the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, and he was talking about the importance of trust. And that's the main thing that you have to have in a relationship, right, is the trust. So building trust between agencies, our nonprofits, our community groups, and our local tribes is vital in maintaining that trust. And I think that he even said that he had a one-strike rule. So like if you break the trust, it's broken. So I think that's the main component in relationships is the trust and the communication. And one of the notes I made for myself is that communication and compensation are two vital steps for continuing and growing this relationship. So I'll stop talking and ask for any other questions before we might possibly end this meeting. I think I appreciate all of you for hanging in there with me throughout the whole thing. Okay, I don't see anybody waving at me.
Last thing I did want to add is I made a small list of about 7 of the 25, and I'm going to be sharing, and I put it on a document for you to send out to everybody.
Wonderful, thank you.
Of course. And I'm probably going to end up following up with a few. I have a list of people to follow up with, just so everyone know. If you get a random email from someone you don't know, it's most likely going to be me. Just throwing it out there now.
I did have an additional question there, Elissa. Take a look.
I'm curious to know whether there's any consultation happening around habitat restoration projects with Native peoples in the Bay Area for culturally important plants and management practices.
I do believe so. I know Segurite Land Trust in the East Bay is working a lot around ecological and plant restoration. We have a lot of our tribes have lists of native plants, and lately in a lot of my consultations, especially around archaeologically sensitive areas, I get these consultation letters, and I'm like, yes, I want to consult about this. And they're like, well, all we're gonna do is put a pipe down, or this is gonna be a housing development. I'm like, we need to talk about land acknowledgements, and if there is an area that you are going to have plants, I would want you to ideally our tribe would recommend that you prioritize California native plant species. And then what comes with that is the potential of a cultural easement where our community can harvest and engage with those plant relatives, because our ancestors, my ancestors, believe that the plants and the animals came first. They are the first people. And we as humans have been given the responsibility to be good stewards and to tend the earth, to sustain ourselves and to sustain our world. The earth does not need us. However, it benefits from healthy, respectful, reciprocal impact. Humans have always had an impact on the earth and on the world around them. And indigenous communities have had an impact on the world since time immemorial, being good stewards. Like California, we see it as a Garden of Eden. It's been stated, it's been a beautiful place. It's because it has been a well-tended garden. And it's due to colonization and the laws and the layers of denying indigenous peoples access and the ability to steward it traditionally, which has led us to some of the problematic occurrences that have happened lately, i.e. people building their homes in floodplains, i.e. all of these catastrophic fires, i.e. the poisoned waters, because if we were brought up with indigenous pedagogies, we might understand that considerations of how our actions and our words impact not only ourselves, our environment, our community, but the next 7 generations. It might mean saying no to the quarter and dividends. What a concept. But tying into that, whenever I'm visiting other territories, I do my best to acknowledge the community of the territories. Like, I name 3 active groups in the East Bay: Moekma, Confederated Villages of Lishan, and Himrin. But I recognize that Himrin doesn't even have a website, but they are a community and they can consult. And Alex and myself and a few other people work well with these elders and these communities, and therefore building relationships is healthy. So it's not going to be as easy as a quick Google search to find out who are the native peoples of my neighborhood, because it is relationship building. And there's also layers. Like, I do recognize that in Santa Clara there is a community that is building their presence, and they go by Tamian Nation, and they are tracing their ancestry and genealogy to Mission Santa Clara and other territories. So I'm sitting here like, all right, it's not that they're new, it's that we are finding stronger ties and connection to community and honoring the layers of history. I have cousins and aunties who are like, oh yeah, I think I'm Ohlone. And then over time, they're like, oh wait, I learned this family line is Chumash territory. And we walk forward with this new information and we try and navigate it respectfully. We are not perfect. We will stumble. Our organizations here in this conversation may stumble around how we connect and how we collaborate and how we contact. There are some people who might reach out and talk to a non-Bay Area Indigenous relative and take their consultation and guidance that might upset some Bay Area Indigenous community members. And it's not that it's okay, but as a human being that's learning in this world, it will be okay. We will stumble, we will mess up, and some of those we might burn our chances, but we learn from it. And so long as we try and take steps to get better, how are we being a good ancestor in training? So that's my kind of input, is like, it's not going to be perfect. We're going to stumble, but just keep trying and keep including, keep going forward in a good way. We always learn more that way. It's how we're built.
It is learning, and it is a process, and there will be those roadblocks. I think that's a great way to wrap up. Adam, Alex, did you have any final recommendations or words that you would like to share with all of us?
I don't believe so. I think more than anything, I'm just grateful to have everyone here and be able to listen. I know this isn't necessarily sometimes the most really present in conversations for everybody, but it's always great to be able to acknowledge other people's time. So thank you.
Say thanks everyone for your attention, and feel free to reach out to us via the Amah Mutsun Land Trust website.
And my heart is full of appreciation for what was spoken.
I think that he's typing that and he's also saying that. So thank you from all of us. I would love to continue this conversation at a future date, just because I feel like it was beneficial for everyone that was here. I hope that we can make some wonderful connections moving forward, and open these lines of communication better, and keep keep this relationship going. So thank you to everyone. Just on the Watershed Forum business end, if you guys want to help plan future meetings, we have our executive committee meeting the 4th Tuesday. So it'll be on the 25th of this month. And then we'll meet again as a forum in July. So you'll be hearing from me. Alex, Adam, Kanyon, thank you all so much for coming and talking to us.